Ladies and gentlemen, there's a moment in every life when the decisions we make or fail to make come back to haunt us. And sometimes the greatest regret isn't about what we did, but what we didn't do when we had the chance. There are moments in life when the course of everything could change with a single decision. A moment where belief in someone's support for a small spark of potential could alter not just their trajectory, but your own. These moments are often subtle, disguised in routine, hidden beneath the noise of bigger names, louder voices, and more obvious talent. Yet they hold incredible power. Missing them, not out of malice, but out of neglect or fear of risk, can become the kind of regret that lingers for years. That's what a missed opportunity really is, not simply a choice passed up, but a turning point unrecognized until it's too far in the past to touch. Think about the times when someone was right in front of you, eager to grow, to learn, to prove themselves. Maybe they didn't have the polish yet, maybe they were a little too quiet, a little too unsure, or maybe they just hadn't been given the platform to shine. And instead of lifting them up, you passed them over. Maybe you told yourself they weren't ready. Maybe you thought they needed more time, more experience, but what they really needed was one thing: your belief. That quiet kind of investment that says, I see something in you and I'm willing to bet on it. Too often, potential is measured by current output. If someone isn't already performing at a high level, we assume they can't. But greatness doesn't always burst into the room. Sometimes it grows in silence, waiting for the right moment and the right person to believe in it. And when that belief never comes, some people falter and some rise despite. But no matter what, the person who missed that chance will one day look back and wonder what had been had they acted differently. The man who benched his backup wasn't cruel. He simply couldn't see the future standing in front of him. He was looking for security, for proven skill, for the easy choice. And in doing so, he missed the extraordinary. He missed the chance to be the one who helped build a legend. He missed the satisfaction of knowing he stood behind someone before the world knew their name. That's the bitter sting of a missed opportunity, not just what it cost the other person, but what it cost you. The legacy you might have shared, the growth you might have inspired, the pride you might have felt being part of someone else's rise. We all make these calls every day in our work, in our relationships, in our judgments of others. And most of the time, we move on without even realizing what we left behind. But sometimes we're forced to watch someone we once doubted go on to become everything we didn't expect. And it's then, in the silence of our own reflection, that the weight of that missed opportunity sets in. Not because we didn't want to help, but because we failed to see. And once that moment is gone, no amount of hindsight can change what we didn't do. That's the pain of underestimating someone. That's the regret of staying silent when we should have spoken belief, of choosing safety when we could have chosen vision. The greatest missed opportunities are not the ones we see in others, but the ones we ignore in ourselves: the instinct to nurture, the wisdom to recognize potential before it blooms, and the courage to act on it before it's too late. Potential doesn't always arrive with flashing lights or bold declarations. More often it comes quietly, wrapped in uncertainty, shadowed by inexperience, and easy to overlook. It shows up as someone still figuring things out, someone who stumbles but gets back up, someone who doesn't yet know how to fully harness what they have inside. And because it's not polished, because it doesn't demand attention, it gets ignored. That's the tragedy of undervalued potential, not that it doesn't exist, but that it's dismissed before it's ever allowed to grow. In every field, from sports to business to art to education, history is filled with people who were once underestimated. Not because they lacked talent, but because their talent wasn't obvious to those around them. They weren't the loudest, they didn't fit the mold, they hadn't yet achieved the kind of success that made people take notice. But they were trying, they were building, they were becoming, and all they needed was for someone to see past the surface and into the possibility. The undervaluing of potential often has more to do with our own assumptions than with the person in question. We judge people based on how they present in a moment, forgetting that growth is not linear, and that brilliance can take time to emerge. We're drawn to the finished product, not the unfinished process. But what if we look closer? What if we made space for the ones who haven't peaked yet, who are still raw but full of drive? What if we understood that today's uncertainty could be tomorrow's greatness? There is something powerful about being seen early. It does something to a person when someone believes in them before they've proven themselves. It gives them permission to take risks, to fail and get up again, to push themselves further than they thought they could. That kind of belief becomes fuel, but when that belief is absent, when they're constantly overlooked, constantly second-guessed, it wears on them. Some keep pushing through it, some fall away. And in both cases, the loss is greater than we often realize. To undervalue someone's potential is to underestimate their future. It's to make a decision rooted in the present without understanding what the future might hold. And the consequences of that can be profound. Sometimes the person we passed over becomes someone everyone later celebrates, and we're left with the realization that we were close to something extraordinary but failed to recognize it. It's easy to believe in someone who's already succeeding. It takes no risk, but believing in someone who is still growing, that's vision. That's leadership, that's courage. When you look at someone and see more than what they are, when you see what they could be, that's when transformation begins. Not just for them, but for you too, because those who recognize and invest in hidden potential often grow alongside the very people they support. Every person you encounter carries a story not yet written, a level they haven't yet reached, a strength they may not even know they possess. Dismissing someone because they haven't reached their peak yet is like closing a book after the first chapter. You miss the arc, you miss the development, you miss the moment when it all comes together. Greatness doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And if we're not listening, if we're too focused on what someone isn't instead of what they could become, we'll miss it. We'll miss the quiet fighters, the late bloomers, the steady builders. We'll miss the very people who could have changed the game, changed the team, changed the culture, changed the world. All because we couldn't see beyond the now. Resilience doesn't always look like bold declarations or dramatic comebacks. Sometimes it's quieter, almost invisible to the outside world. It's found in the overlooked individual who keeps showing up, who continues to put in the work, who refuses to disappear even when the world barely notices they're there. Being overlooked isn't just about being left out, it's about being seen and still not being chosen. It's about having your name passed over, your efforts unnoticed, and your value questioned time and time again. But within that struggle, for some, something powerful begins to grow, a kind of resilience that doesn't ask for recognition, but earns bosses. The overlooked are forced to develop a kind of strength that those in the spotlight rarely need. They must find motivation from within, not from applause. They must learn to keep moving without validation, to believe in themselves when belief from others is in short supply. It's a difficult road, and many give up along the way. But those who don't, those who keep climbing with no guarantees, often become the strongest, most grounded, and most capable people in the room. Not because they've had it easy, but because they've learned how to keep going when it's hard. To be overlooked is to be told in subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ways that you're not enough yet, that you don't quite belong, that your time hasn't come. But the resilient ones don't let that narrative define them. They rewrite it. They use the doubt as fuel. They convert frustration into focus. Every time they're underestimated, they stack it like wood for a fire they're quietly building. And one day when the flame catches, it burns hotter than anyone expected, because it was never just about proving others wrong, it was about proving to themselves that they could endure, grow, and rise without permission. Resilience forged in the shadows is different from the kind born of success. It's not about bouncing back from one major failure, it's about surviving long periods of being unseen. It's about working without praise, learning without a teacher, showing up even when no one is watching. The overlooked person often becomes self-made, self-motivated, and fiercely independent, not by choice, but by necessity. And by the time they do break through, they've built not just skill, but character. They've learned how to hold themselves together when the world offered no support. What people often forget is that the journey of the overlooked is not just a test of ability, it's a test of heart. It's easy to stay the course when others are cheering you on. It's much harder to keep going in silence, to trust your path when the doors keep closing. But this is where resilience is truly born, in those long unseen hours of effort that no one ever celebrates. That kind of resilience doesn't fade when things get tough. It's been tough all along. And when that person finally gets their shot, the results are often extraordinary. Not because they're naturally more talented, but because they're prepared. They've spent years honing their craft, sharpening their mindset, and learning how to thrive under pressure. They've been building quietly while others were performing publicly. And when their time comes, they don't crumble under the weight of opportunity. They rise to meet it, fully aware of what it took to get there. The overlooked who stay in the game long enough often become the most impactful figures in any arena. Not because they had it easy, but because they had to earn every inch of progress. Their resilience, born of rejection and silence, becomes their greatest strength. It shapes them into leaders who understand struggle, into champions who don't take success for granted, and into people who lift others because they remember exactly how it felt to be left behind. There are decisions we make and decisions we avoid. The ones we avoid often feel safer in the moment, less risky, less exposed. We tell ourselves that staying still is neutral, that doing nothing is better than doing the wrong thing. But inaction has consequences just as real, just as lasting, and sometimes far more painful than any misstep. When we fail to act, fail to speak, fail to support, we create a ripple that moves through time, often unnoticed until it returns to us in the form of regret. Inaction is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as patience, as caution, as waiting for the right time. But sometimes the right time doesn't come unless you make it come. The window opens, the opportunity appears, and you hesitate. Maybe you're unsure. Maybe you're afraid of being wrong, of standing out, of betting on the unproven. So you pause, you stay quiet, you do nothing. And in that nothing, everything begins to change. Not because you made a mistake, but because you chose not to move. When someone needs your support, your belief, or your action, your silence is louder than you think. People remember when they were ignored. They remember when they needed someone to back them, and no one did. That kind of absence leaves a mark. And the damage isn't just to them, it's to you too. Because later, when the moment is gone and you realize what could have been, you're left with a version of yourself you wish you hadn't been, passive, unsure, disconnected. The consequences of inaction are rarely immediate. That's why they're so dangerous. There's no explosion, no collapse, no urgent call for help, just a quiet drift away from what might have been. You lose trust, you lose relationships, you lose the chance to be a part of someone else's growth or success. And the most painful part is knowing you had a role to play and chose not to step into it. You stood at the edge of possibility and backed away. Sometimes inaction comes from doubt. You question if your voice matters, if your choice will change anything, but all it takes is one moment of courage to alter someone's direction. One honest word. One small gesture. One choice to act rather than hesitate. And when we fail to do that, when we underestimate the power of our involvement, we deny others what they might have needed most. We deny ourselves the chance to become more than observers of life. We remain spectators in stories we could have helped shape. In the story of the overlooked backup who rose to greatness, the most haunting part is not the rise itself, it's the earlier chapter where someone could have recognized his potential and didn't. The one who had the power to act, to believe, to elevate and did nothing. That moment, forever sealed in the past, becomes a memory that whispers you had a chance. That whisper doesn't fade with time. It grows louder, not because the world blames you, but because you know you could have made a difference. Inaction rarely feels like failure at first. It feels like safety, but over time it reveals itself as absence, a missing link, a void where something powerful could have existed. And while action carries the risk of being wrong, inaction carries the certainty of never knowing. You don't get to see what could have bloomed because you never planted the seed. You never watered it. You never stepped forward when someone needed you to. The cost of inaction is invisible until it isn't. Until the person you didn't believe in becomes everything you failed to see. Until the moment you let pass becomes the one you wish you could have backed up. Belief is one of the most powerful forces a person can offer another. It's not loud or always visible, but its effects run deep. When someone believes in you truly, deeply, it changes the way you see yourself. It gives you permission to aim higher, to fight harder, and to imagine a version of yourself that feels out of reach. The power of belief lies not in magic, but in the quiet confidence it instills, the unspoken message that says, I see something in you, even if you don't yet see it in yourself. We often associate belief with results, thinking it only comes once someone has proven themselves. But real belief doesn't wait for proof. It precedes success. It sees past the surface and into potential. It's what turns someone's maybe into momentum. When a coach, a friend, a teacher, a mentor, or even a stranger looks at someone who is struggling, uncertain, or still learning and chooses to say, you've got something, that moment has weight. It becomes a spark. And with the right care, it can become a fire. Belief isn't just emotional support, it's practical impact. People who are believed in work harder, they recover from setbacks faster. They set bigger goals. They stop playing small. The belief of one person can unlock the belief of another. It doesn't guarantee success, but it makes success feel possible. And for someone who's been doubted, ignored, or overlooked, that feeling can change everything. On the other side, the absence of belief can be just as powerful, but in a darker way. When someone is consistently doubted or dismissed, they start to internalize that message. They lower their expectations. They begin to question their own worth. It's not always the criticism that hurts the most, is silence, the lack of support, the passive disbelief that says you're not worth the risk. That kind of wound doesn't heal easily. And the tragedy is that sometimes all it would have taken was one person choosing to see more. Belief doesn't require certainty. It requires faith. It's a decision to stand beside someone before the world sees their value. It's trust in the unseen effort, the late night work, the persistence in the face of failure. And when that belief is expressed, when someone says, I know you can, it echoes louder than any applause after the success. Because it came when there was no success yet. It came when it mattered most. Some of the greatest achievements in history were made possible because someone believed in someone else. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. They invested when no one else would. They encouraged when others stayed silent. They created space for growth where others saw limits. And in doing so, they became part of that story, part of the reason someone dared to keep going. There's a responsibility that comes with the power of belief. It means being aware of how much your words and actions can shape someone's path. It means choosing to speak life into potential rather than waiting for proof. It means understanding that greatness often starts small, and your belief might be the one thing that helps it grow. Everyone is capable of belief. It doesn't take status or wealth. It takes intention. It takes attention. And it takes heart. The power of belief is never just about what it does for the person you believe in. It's also about what it reveals in you, your willingness to see the invisible, to bet on the uncertain, and to invest in people rather than perfection says more about your character than any title ever could. Belief builds people, and people built by belief build everything else. There is something profoundly human about the desire to rise, to achieve, to be seen and valued. But there is something even more powerful, more lasting in the decision to lift others as we climb. In a world that so often pushes people to compete, to prove, to focus only on their own advancement, the act of lifting someone else becomes a quiet form of rebellion. It's not weakness, and it's not charity, it's strength, and it's legacy. When you use your voice, your influence, your time, or even just your presence to help someone else grow, you become part of a chain reaction that extends far beyond what you can see. Everyone remembers the person who gave them a chance, the one who listened when others ignored, the one who said, "You belong here," when doubt was loudest. Lifting others isn't about grand gestures, it's about small intentional actions, choosing to see someone's worth before it's widely recognized, offering support without being asked, creating space for someone else to rise even if it means stepping aside. These are the moments that shape lives and change trajectories. Sometimes lifting others means mentoring. Sometimes it means speaking someone's name in rooms they can't yet enter. Sometimes it means simply noticing their effort, their talent, their hunger, and telling them it matters. It means recognizing that your journey is not diminished by helping someone else find their path. In fact, it's enriched. The best leaders are not the ones who stand alone at the top, but the ones who bring others with them, who build platforms instead of pedestals. Too many people walk through life underseen and underestimated, not because they lack ability, but because they haven't been given the right chance. Their light has been dimmed by circumstance, silence, or simply being overlooked. You may not be able to change the whole system, but you can change someone's moment. You can make the difference between someone giving up and someone pressing forward. That is not a small thing, that is everything. Lifting others is not always easy. It requires humility. It requires effort. It means choosing patience over pride, service over spotlight. But it is one of the most meaningful things you can do with whatever power, platform, or position you have. Because one day the person you help may be the one who transforms a community, leads a team, writes a story no one else could, and part of that story will belong to you. We often wait for the right time to support someone after they've proven themselves, after they've succeeded. But the time to lift someone is when they're still building, when they're unsure. That is when it matters most. Your belief, your encouragement, your presence, it tells them they are not invisible, that they are worth the effort, that they have fought. And from that place of being lifted, people learn how to lift others too. That is how cultures shift. That is how movements grow. The truth is, none of us gets anywhere alone. Behind every success is a trail of people who opened a door, gave a hand, or simply said, "I believe in you." We all have that power, and using it doesn't weaken us, it strengthens the bonds that make achievement more than a solo victory. It makes success shared. It makes it meaningful. So wherever you are, whatever you've achieved or are still reaching for, look around. Someone near you is waiting to be seen. Someone is struggling to be heard. Someone is trying to find their place. And you might be the one who helps them find it, not because it's your job, but because it's your opportunity. The kind that doesn't just change someone else's life, but deep down changes yours too.